David Fairchild is an author who's with us here just now. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me over.
Now, you've got a new book out called The Exodus. The Exodus doesn't have a T at the end. I don't know why I said that. Anyway, how would you
That's okay.
describe that book?
This is a book that it explores the concept of what happens when a fence gets to take control of law
Oh,
and control how and who gets to say what happens to people who offend you.
ah. To be honest, I misheard you then, and I thought you said offence instead of offence, and I was so confused.
You have to forgive me. I'm from Utah and we have that messed
Yeah.
up dialect.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting concept then, because I suppose in this day and age, people are offended by all sorts of things, and it's just sort of assumed that we have to pander to them. But just because you're offended doesn't always mean you're right.
Absolutely. We seek offense so much, it seems, that we look for a reason to justify why we should be allowed to be offended. We
Hmm.
seem to enjoy being offended
Yeah,
anymore.
yeah,
It's
it's
pretty lame.
yeah. So where did the idea for the book come from? Is it just things you've observed from the world?
Well, yeah, I teach critical thinking classes
Uh,
in college, and it's getting very difficult sometimes to see where that line is, where we're allowed to actually show students that there are different perspectives out there,
hmm.
because universities are founded on the principle uh, of bringing in diversity of people and philosophy together to allow them to not have to travel outside, have to put in a whole bunch of money to travel to hear different philosophies.
Hmm.
And we're just pandering now to so many people who just get offended at just anything and everything, that
Yeah.
we're starting to lose concept that it's okay to be offended and others can have
Yeah.
perspectives.
Hmm. And why do you think these offended people seem to be so successful at getting their way, I suppose?
I think because they uh, are so tuned in on trying to get people to recognize that they're being offended and that they
Hmm.
need to forgive them, that they forget how to forgive themselves. And it
Yeah.
becomes a, you need to forgive me or you need to accept me, but I don't have to forgive you. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to, because that's not my responsibility. It's yours.
Hmm. And I suppose there's a bit of another side as well, where some people get offended by the people getting offended, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, it's also like the person who tries to go out to offend you and then you don't get offended, and
Oh, yeah.
so then they get offended that you're not offended.
Yeah.
And it's just I like to tell people, and I picked it up from my mentor, that offense is I know people hate hearing that offense is a choice, but
Hmm.
offense can only be taken. It can never be given.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, excuse me. I got that backwards. Offense can only be given; it can never be taken. That's
Oh.
defense. Sorry, I can't believe I messed that one up. But offense can only be given; it can never be taken. So even if I intend to offend you, and you don't allow that power to happen, then there's no offense on your side. Now, that's not
Hmm.
to say that people. That's not to say that that gives people a right to be rude
Yeah.
and just brash to everybody, but it should help us to remember that, there's danger in when we start to justify why we can take offense and why we should be allowed to take offense. And we have a hierarchy to
Hmm.
offense now, that this person up here has more right to be offended than this person down here. And it's just it's this person can say, well, I have more right to be offended than you because I fit into this category, and you don't know anything about what it's like. And it's like they forget, just because you might not be this person, that doesn't
Hmm.
mean you don't know how to observe and pay attention and see what offense is, because everybody can take offense at something.
Yeah, that's true. I suppose everything you could possibly say could offend someone somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And depending on where you live, and that's kind
Yeah.
of something that happens in this book, is this book breaks up particularly America into a whole bunch of sub-nations, because depending on where you live, I mean, we have different political boundaries. So if you live in one particular state, of course, people are more offended by a different political state. And depending on where you're in these boundaries, you may be offended by something else, whether it's offended at unions or offended at people who just say something that doesn't support your opinion, or whether you're gay, and it just depends on the different area. And I kind of pull those out and show the different boundaries of these sub-nations in America when they're directed by a fence that's prominent in those different areas.
Yeah. And do you think that, what was I going to say? I can't even remember, so never mind. But how long did the book actually take you to write when you first began it?
It actually took me about 5 months to do it. Wow. But what happened was I started writing it. So in this book, what happens is, I've talked about this world that takes offense, but for people to escape that offense and get to safety, they have to actually use the drug cartel tunnels under America to sneak into underground cities while they look for a place to go, because countries' borders are closed. And so what I did was, when I first started writing, I had a character in mind, and I started writing it, and I knew what I wanted it to be, but it just didn't, that character, it was a pretty cool character, and a lot of people like the character. And I just hit a point where I went, this is not the story I wanted to happen, or this is not taking the direction. And then it just occurred to me that it just really wasn't the character to drive it. So I said, I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to start over. And so I started over and created this other character, and she just came out, took over, and I still use the first part. In fact, the first part of the book is what I first started, but then this other character emerged, and I went, that's what this is. This is a collection of short stories in different areas of the world that all contribute to a bigger story. And so we have a bunch of different short stories going on, and short stories for me are much easier to write. So that helped to make it go a little bit faster for me. But then, they all keep pointing back to this big story. And that's what I loved about this character that came out, which would have never been created if I wouldn't have said, okay, stop here. This character's not going where I want. And the new character just blew everything. The book wouldn't be what it is without her. She's awesome.
Yeah. And how's the book told as well? Is it sort of anti people who get offended, or is it kind of told maybe from the perspective of someone that gets offended easily?
It's got a mix of a lot of that in there. In one area of the country, we see it through the eyes of somebody who's trying to hide her son and herself because they have mental disabilities. And you hide that because for some reason we must have a villain, and we are putting a huge villain mask today on people who have disabilities, particularly in areas of, say, gun control or health issues. You know, this person's got mental disabilities, so they're going to snap and kill everybody. And so it starts with the perspective of that person trying to hide from a community that finds their ailments offensive. And then we jump to a community where they find people who work without belonging to a union offensive, and that they're willing to exile those people. And then we do have people who are the ones who take offense. And so it's told through a lot of different perspectives.
Yeah. And why do you think so many people seem to be looking for something to be offended by? Is it just they've got nothing better to do? Is there some sort of psychological thing that's in some people and not in others?
I think it's because we are training ourselves to look for fault with everything. Social media has trained us that when somebody does something, we are more likely to attack what they did wrong than we are to support what they did correctly. If and I like to use this analogy, if a movie star, for instance, says something wrong, we want to have our opinions validated. And when a movie star who has a big microphone gets up and says something against us, then against our opinion, then we lash out, we get mad, we call people, hey, don't ever use this person again, never, don't see his movies, so much to the point that we're willing to destroy the lives of the people who this person happens to actually employ. I mean, that's how much we hate this person. We just hate you so much. No more money for you. And while you're at it, forget every single person who works for you, because if they were good people, they wouldn't work for you. And forget their children who need food.
That's kind of true, I suppose, because people with the most controversial opinions seem to have had the biggest publicity recently because everyone's getting outraged by the things they're saying.
Absolutely, they absolutely are. It's if you don't agree with me, then you're wrong.
Mm.
Um, rather than hold discussions, which discussion has never been about who's right or who's wrong. It's about
Yeah.
all these different perspectives and different angles that many people might not take into consideration. I see life this way, but maybe you see something that I am missing that you can say, well, what about this concept? And we have this discussion. But what we've stopped doing, and it seems to me as I've observed a discussion over the years, is that we're starting to not have this discussion. We're starting to turn it into a contest. We think it's debate, where debate is a contest. Debate is there's a winner, there's a loser, and that's why we have debate competitions. But we seem to think that's how discussion works too. I'm right, you're wrong. Well, if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
prove it to me. No, you prove you're right. It's your job. And so I think that's where we're kind of losing it. Is we are no longer aware of how to have discussions in many levels. We think the discussion that we should have should follow the rules of how we communicate on social media.
Yeah. And do you think that people are maybe more stubborn now, that they're not willing to maybe admit after
Ooh.
an argument or discussion that maybe their mind
I
has
don't know. There's a lot of
changed?
stubborn people out there through the ages.
Oh, yeah, that's
So
true.
uh, I would say this. I would say there's a lot of people who don't know how, and there are a lot of people who are unwilling to. And I
Yeah.
think there are a lot of people who may not have seen it work as it should because they haven't been around discussion
Yeah.
enough. The social media, if we've grown up on social media, for instance, what a wonderful place to learn how to have
Yeah.
discussion with each other, right?
Yeah.
So if that's all we do, how would we possibly learn to hold a discussion if we're not seeing people hold real discussions? So I think that
Yeah.
might have some of it. I don't know if it's stubbornness. I think there's
Mm.
some play in there, but I think it's more of we're kind of forgetting how.
Yeah. And do you think there's sort of a lack of forgiveness with us now in general? Because if somebody does the slightest thing wrong, that's it. Their career is over in some cases. So
Mhm.
we sort of just don't, so I guess, give people a second chance anymore, I suppose.
No, we don't like to give people a second chance. One example that I really like to show for this is maybe
Yeah.
maybe you saw it years back with Nicholas Sandman. He was the high school student who wore the red MAGA hat, and the news media just attacked him, saying he was being disrespectful. And the more we to a Native American and in a situation, and the more we dug into it, the more we found out the news had it wrong,
Mm.
and they had just attacked this kid. But what was interesting to me was here's a kid who's not an adult yet, he hasn't reached the age of being adult. He's still developing. He's still learning philosophies. I mean, he hasn't grown up yet. That's all there is to
Yeah.
it. And so many adults, celebrities, adults all around the world came out calling for the destruction of a kid,
Wow.
and they were so happy about it. They were just like,
Yeah.
this person, and there were death threats. They were yelling at the parents. They were just calling him out. I mean, really just destroyed this kid's life. And yet then we found out, oh, media got it wrong. And
Mm.
very little, I mean, he had to fight for an apology, but people were so quick to go, hey, let's destroy this person, when they should have been going, hey, maybe he made a mistake. I don't know. Can we find out what the full story is? I think I don't want to jump to a conclusion until I know everything. And that's
Yeah.
how forgiveness could work. And even if you do learn something, you go, so he made a mistake. Maybe he'll improve now, but they're not going to improve if you just hate on him, because they're going to be more strong-willed against it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and actually, that's sort of maybe a thing, we don't have as opinionated TV news channels and whatever over here, but certainly newspapers sometimes. You see a headline and think, that's outrageous, what? And then you actually click on the story and it's not really what the headline says. It's a bit misleading.
Right. There's so much misdirection and clickbait anymore that
Yeah.
it's just mix in the misdirection and the clickbait into a society, an increasing society that gets locked more into social media with each generation, and you have people who just don't know how to communicate as well
Mm.
as, I don't want to say as well as we used to, as well as they could.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of the book and the story, how well does the world work when you have offense taking so much power?
Well, in terms of the book, what we end up having is government who imprisons basically
Oh.
people who offend whatever. In one area, when people have mental ailments, we put them to work in orange groves because that's where we
Mm.
can keep an eye on them. In another area of the country, when somebody says something that doesn't subscribe to the majority's opinion, they put that person in offenders prison. And
Wow.
in one section of the book, one person breaks out of that prison and takes a whole bunch of people hostage so that he can get out of the city. And in another area, they in another area of the country, they've almost become Iron Curtain in a way. Nobody can
Oh,
come
wow.
in, nobody can go out. You must fall in line with a certain lifestyle. You must fall in line with a certain belief system.
Yeah.
Um, and in all of this, there's one working party trying to get in and to rescue the people who are trapped there, and that's
Yeah.
this drug cartel. And there's a little bit to it where they're actually trying to develop a way for them to get out and go somewhere else, but
Oh.
without letting anybody know. So in terms of how does offense control it, offense controls absolutely everything.
Mm.
You have political powers controlling everything that people are doing. You have store owners. For instance, in one part of the book, some kid who is not part of a union member has to push the shopping cart through the store and pull off all the things that you buy. And a little kid finds something that the union member can't find, and he puts it in the shopping cart. And ooh, big
What?
lights, big this. Does your child have a problem with acting out? Do we need to get child services involved? Do we need to evaluate this kid? And that's the level of where we're going with this offense. I mean,
Mm.
just even taking a jar of jam, putting in a shopping cart. Ooh, you've done my job for me. You need to go to jail, and you're a child.
Yeah.
So
Do you think this is stuff that realistically could happen in the future? Because I suppose a few of those things have happened in places in the world in the past and present, but I don't know if it's necessarily to do with offence.
um, I think there's places where I don't think we've had any laws yet going off on it, and I hope that we don't. But the conversations that we hear around in politics, and this is in various places of the world, it's not just the U.S., it's in various places, is that a lot of laws and a lot of discussion going on in politics do center around making laws because of offense.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. And you've written, well, you've not written, but you've done an audiobook as well with a narrator. And I take it the narrator isn't you because you mentioned it was a she.
Right. Jacqueline Rendell, and
Uh-huh.
she's awesome. Now, do you listen to audiobooks?
Not really, to be honest, but I feel like it's
Okay.
something I should do.
No, I encourage it. A lot of people sit there and say audiobooks are not really reading.
Yeah,
And I disagree with that as somebody who teaches, reading, writing,
yeah.
composition, English, literature. But what's interesting is the I there is a life in audiobooks that can come out that you don't always get in the book itself. And
Mm.
my narrator, Jacqueline Rendell, does that with this book. I say that there are two versions of this book. There's the version I wrote, and there's the version that she tells. And there
Ah.
are so many things that she does in her book, in her audio narration, that takes it to the next level that I'm not able to do.
Mm.
And she's just absolutely amazing. And there are a lot of audiobooks, and I tell people this all the time. There are a lot of audiobooks where people pick up an audiobook and they listen to it, and you hear the person, they might have a bad dialect or no intonation to their voice whatsoever, and they read the story like this and click, 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 and
Yeah.
and you can hear them inhaling their juji fruits as they're reading. And and you get annoyed, and you can listen and go, man, I could do such a better job than this person. Well, this is an audiobook performer who you would never say that about. This book has more than 200 characters in it, and she has different voices for all of them. You can tell them all apart. Wow. Her energy is just it's just amazing. She was incredible to work with. I just loved working with her. I look forward to doing it again. But I know that she's doing so much audio work now that who knows if I'll be able to in the future, but she's awesome. I love the audiobook. I encourage that just as much as the book itself. The two different versions of the story, in my opinion.
Yes, and I'm assuming by the book having 200 characters in it, that's as in people and not letters. Otherwise, it would be a very short book.
Right. People.
Just as long as a tweet, I think, which would be quite appropriate.
Right. Hey, if people want to buy that tweet, I'll be happy to sell it, but no.
Yeah. Well, where are we able to check out the book if we'd like to read it and find out all about this alternate reality?
Oh, yeah. So it's available in Kindle, hardback, paperback, and audiobook. You can get the Kindle, paperback, hardback on Amazon. You can get the audiobook on Audible. Well, you can also get the audiobook on Amazon as well. But that's where I like to direct people to go get it, because easy place to go pick up your books.
Yeah, and everyone's used Amazon before, so it's easy.
Who doesn't? I mean, I love all the brick and mortar bookstores, but the numbers don't lie. Amazon sells more books than all the books in the world combined. So that must say people are using Amazon. So safe bet to say go to Amazon, but you can get it other places. You can get it Barnes and Nobles. You can get it at various online bookstores. It's pretty easy to track down.
Yep. Well, thanks very much for joining us here on the show today. It's been great to have you on the air.
Thank you. It's been nice meeting you.